Oh, I cannot see you, so shout out if you don't hear me, but I think you can hear me. So it's great to see you all, and actually it's great to be here. Although I grew up just 200 kilometers away, that's my second time in Belarus, it's my second time in Minsk. And what I've been seeing, yesterday we were in the university, Belarusian State University, and he asked me what's the difference that I'm seeing in between those times. Actually right now I'm seeing much more, many more young people that are building companies that are excited about technology, and actually it's a very exciting field to be in, because if you go to London, it's already there. And here you're part of something that's just developing. So it's also great to be here. It's great to see you all. Now, my name is Mantas. I run a high potential client acceleration program in Google. I'm going to tell a bit more of what it is in the presentation. But I really want to cover this topic of the new breed of organizations that we seem, or there's a tendency that actually they are emerging. It's still a bit of an early stage, but those organizations, they typically are built on the top of established exponential organizations. That's why I took the liberty to call them exponential organizations, or Exos 2.0. But by doing that, they seem to be driving much faster growth in much leaner way, and really taking over the world in the ways that we haven't seen before. So I think a lot of you, especially those who are starting to think about building a company, or those that are at the earliest stage, it's important to keep this concept in mind, because I think we're going to be seeing more and more of companies like that. But I'll try to get through this concept through the presentation, and I want to do that in 3 steps. So first, I want to talk a bit about the Google Seed program, to give a bit of background where I'm coming from and maybe where a lot of my observations are based. Now, then what I want to do is really talk about the whole concept of exponential organization. Some of you might be familiar with it, some of you not. And also show you how it links to this exponential organization 2.0 concept. And last but not least, I want to share with you some, hopefully an advice or tips or encouragement around what you can do with all this. So let's start from the seed. And when I introduce myself, that's typically the question that I get, right? People ask, what the hell is seed program? We know this seed activity as a venture activity for the early stage. You know, is that part of our investment strategy, or is that part of some other activity? So the answer is it's some part of the other activity. And seed actually stands for Startup Entrepreneurship and Export Development. Now, what we have noticed that through our work with startups and scalable technology platforms, that their success with us is not really defined by our products as much as their readiness to scale up. Right, so back in the days, we really focused on helping them use our products, whether it's cloud or advertising solutions that Google provides. But we realized that if we take one step back and we go into much earlier stage, talk with the companies, really help them structure the business in the right way, so it helps them scale from the very beginning, help them sort out the data and analytics problems, then the whole system, after a long period of time, actually starts working, right? And those clients tend to be more ready, tend to be more successful by themselves, and also more successful with us. So that's why Seed program really covers these 3 pillars, right? So one thing that I do a lot of work is really figuring out whether the business model of a startup or a technology company is ready for scaling up. Where are the obstacles, or where are the areas where it will potentially break, right? And helping to fix this in advance. Then the second step, we do a lot of work around data and data analytics. Now, you all are familiar with the technology world. If there is one single most important thing that it's really about, you know, working with data. If you get this wrong, you might fail a company very fast. If you get this right, even with the mediocre idea, you can get pretty far. Then the last part, of course, you know, once those 2 are fixed, there is a suite of products that Google has got that helps companies grow. So that naturally leads into that aspect as a first step. Now, when I think about one single thing that describes my personal job, or what drives me, what's my passion behind doing this work and working with entrepreneurs, is really having an opportunity to work on business cases that helps them unlock exponential growth. So this is a chart. This is a trend line from a real case. Now, I cannot share the name or the actual numbers of the company as confidential, but it basically showcases how the sales volumes, online sales volumes for this company has developed over last 3 years. Now, I started working in this company at the end of 2015, and you can see that it didn't pick up immediately, right? That's what I'm saying. There's no quick fix. It's really identifying problems, solving them, and scaling from there. But you can see that towards the end of 2016, there was very rapid growth, right? And that growth was not an ambitious 10x, it was 34x actually compared to the starting period. So it really proves that if company is ready to scale globally and those problems that typically prevent some companies of succeeding are addressed at a very early stage, it pays off for both company and us. And this is where it really clicked me when I started working and doing these projects and seeing this materializing, that maybe we're moving into the world where established companies, the companies have built amazing digital products that are global and are still growing at amazing pace. Maybe it's also time for them to work closely with the new potential exponential companies and drive mutual growth. Now, the concept of exponential organization is not new, right? It actually has been put up by Salim Ismail. I never know if I pronounce his name correctly, but he's a co-founder of Singularity University. That's a university that really looks into how, on one side, technology is driving this accelerating change in the world, but also on the other side, what that means for the new companies and also for the established companies. And in his book, Exponential Organizations, which I definitely suggest everybody to read, he talks that there is this set of organizations that have figured out how to do business in the digital world and use exponential technology to drive output, which is 10 times bigger than their peers, right? So they're set up in a way, they know how to use the data, they're internally set up in a way that essentially allows to move from this steady gradual growth, which we've seen before in other industries, to this exponential growth, and hence the name Exponential Organizations. Now, a lot of that is built on this law of accelerating returns, right? Mike has shared the slide before with the essentially similar idea, but it is built on the work essentially of Singularity University, where they actually observe that once something gets digitalized, so there's information and technology applied to a problem or a solution or a product, it tends to grow at exponential rates. So instead of growing from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it grows at 2, 4, 8, 16, etc. And that kind of changes the way we have to think about things, and that's the real power of it, that innovation is not really developed gradually, right? It's built through steps, and then once you unlock it, it accelerates, like we saw in the case before. This is something that's really, really characteristic to the successful exponential organizations. Now, they use this principle to explain a lot of success behind big technology companies like Facebook, Amazon, and Google, right? Obviously, you know that Facebook made this global connectivity and messaging very cheap using digital and exponential organizational principles. Amazon has opened up inventory of immense amount that has never been seen before in retail using the same principles. And Google was all about organizing web information and then make it accessible to people. Now, the most interesting part, at least for me, the person who is in digital for quite a while, was that at the end of a book, they talked about, some thoughts what would happen with the companies, that were successful, that were these exponential organizations, what's their future beyond their business. And they actually mentioned that what they will probably be becoming more and more is the platforms where the new companies are built on, right? And now, I think it's too early to still judge if that's how the future will look like. Predicting the future is very hard, and probably those that try, it's very big likelihood that they get it wrong. But if we take example of Google, I think we can see a bit of that happening already. So Google started in 1998 as a company that solved technically complicated problem, but from the conceptual perspective, not that difficult. So there was loads of information. I was going onto the web, and it was impossible to have this list of websites saved that you can go to, and you needed a search engine that would allow you to navigate for this information. And there were alternative search engines, alternative solutions, but they just managed to solve this problem better, and that's why Google has become so successful. Now, if we look today from the consumer's point of view, right, the company is still growing and it's driving this amazing product development. So now we have 7 products with over 1 billion users each, right, spanning from, well, the search that we started now to Google Maps, YouTube, you know very well those products. But the more interesting angle to look at Google is actually the developer's point of view. So now these are the products that we actually put up for the developers to build their platforms, to build their solutions, to scale them, to actually make money out of them. And if you can see, not all of these products have 1 billion users, right? But they're very important for the developer community because there are products that allow you to essentially build the product at first place, host it on a cloud infrastructure. Then you have some products that allow you to grow and essentially scale up, get more users, drive more sales. And there are also products that allow you to implement ad-based business models, right? So this is not the only business model to go with, but if you're going with that business model, that's something that you can tap into. So you probably can start feeling that there is the consumer point of view of Google, but there's also a platform for developers point of view of Google, which taps very closely into what was talked about in this Exponential Organizations book, right? So if we take this concept further, right, and I took the liberty to do that, probably if the exponential companies are turning into these platforms that new companies are built on, then those new companies should have slightly different attributes, right? They should look differently, and thus can probably be called Exponential Organizations 2.0. Now, I think a really good example of this is Pokemon Go. And we discussed in this conference Pokemon Go quite a bit already, but I think the angle that I have here hasn't been touched yet. So we know the whole success behind Pokemon Go, this augmented reality game that just took world by storm. But if we look at numbers, they're the numbers that were never seen before, right? These were numbers that were drastically different to anything that happened with technology and new companies before. So if we look on the left graph, we can see the comparison of daily active users of Pokemon Go to Twitter. And this is actually from their launch. It's only 4 days of time that it took them to almost reach the daily active user number of Twitter, the company and the technology platform that was built 4 years before, right? So think about if now companies can accelerate at this pace, and that pace is compared to the companies that were already seen as accelerating very fast, something is happening, right? These companies are different. Now, the other interesting aspect that actually was very successful as a business, so there on the right you can see a comparison of Pokemon Go with other popular game titles. So it took them 3 times less to reach 500 million of revenue than Candy Crush, which was the example of gaming going viral, right? Of game going viral. And they were 7 times faster than other popular titles like Clash of Titans and Clash of Clans, which are very big gaming titles. So this company was faster than the rest, and it was smarter at monetizing than the rest, right? And I think this really shows the whole aspect behind it, and I think it's one case representing one aspect, but it can be extrapolated to many different cases. But here you can see how it looked like from the cloud infrastructure perspective, right? So this is essentially transactions per second, so the cloud infrastructure load, if we can call it this way, that the company has projected at, so on the orange you can see the actual scenario that they wanted to reach, the target scenario. The red one was their, well, ambitious from business perspective, critical from cloud perspective scenario, while green is the actual growth that they had. So it's very probably simple to draw a conclusion that the Pokemon Go would have been successful if it was built in a standard way. If it wasn't built on a platform that actually knows how to manage growth and scale of the size, it would have died after 2 days, right? And then you know that this whole thing was really driven by traction. There would have been the whole phenomenon of Pokemon Go, right? So by them really understanding that, you know, you really, I don't know, intentionally or not, that's hard to say, that if you build, if you focus on your core asset, which is the game and game experience, and build the rest using partnerships, in this case Google Cloud, but probably many other, you can drive a much bigger scale, much faster, right? Even compared to the companies that were known as disruptors, the game changers, the exponential organizations. So I think this is what's the key characteristic of this exponential organizations 2.0. And if you look at Google again, and if you think about, you know, the assets that you have at your disposal, they are across the board, right? You have cloud infrastructure that provides you now, if you do AI startup, machine learning models and computing capacity that's needed to run them. It provides you the security aspects of hosting user information and data, right? Imagine how much time it would take for you to build that up, right? And if that's not your core focus, if you're not a security or data security company, then it doesn't make sense to do it, right? You can move much faster without doing that. It's the same story with data measurement systems. I've seen myself back in the days when startups were building their own dashboards and data analytics systems. That doesn't make sense anymore because you won't build it as good unless you're a data analytics company. And it doesn't make sense to waste energy or time on this. Same story applies to user acquisition and user growth, which is AdWords in our case, and user monetization. And the last aspect, I think, from this that a lot of companies don't realize that now many companies, Google included, but also Amazon and Facebook, they also have service offerings where you can actually talk to people, you can get best practices, you can get localization, you can get internalization as part of your work, right? So there's a bunch of problems that are solved for you that you can tap into, and in this way really build these organizations that are growing at unheard growth, right? So I really see that on one side, although, you know, it's still a theoretical proposal that companies, the exponential organizations will turn into platforms, but there's already a lot of that going on, and what we're seeing is skyrocketing companies that are coming out of it. Snapchat actually is another interesting case I suggest for you to look into with a very similar story. Now, this is exactly what I mean, and I think that's my suggestion to you, based on the experience of working with startups and tech companies, is that you really, really have to be good in this world, working with your core assets, concentrating on them, and then build the rest through partnerships, right? And this is the mindset that you have to carry probably from the very beginning. Now, why this is happening and why now? I think there are a few things that are happening in the world that makes it fundamentally different from the way it was back in the days when Facebook or even Google or Amazon was built. So this is a bit of a crowded slide, but I think it's a good slide because it compares 3 different periods that are separated by a decade. So 2 of those periods have happened. 1 period will happen in the future, and it's a bit of a forward-looking number, but you know, just trying to make some estimations there. But we can look at 2007 as a starting point, and at that time in the world there was only 1.2 billion internet users. Well, at that time we believed that that's a lot, right? And that represented 18% of world's population. Now, fast forwards to today, 2017, we have 3.6 billion users, nearly half of world's population. So think about what that means for scale. Now, if your startup gets traction and picks up, it scales to a much greater extent. It scales to the much bigger audience, right? That means you cannot do things the way you've done before. And 2007 was not that far away. iPhone was launched in 2007, right? The other thing that's very, very important to understand that the experience that the users have, and especially those that, for example, are younger, right? They have very different interaction or very different understanding of internet and connectivity. 2007 was still a desktop-first world where we would need to sit down to a computer to access internet. Now, 2017 is a mobile-first world, and we know that. We know that the companies like Uber or Snapchat wouldn't be here if they wouldn't have users that are mobile natives and can use this technology and adapt it. If we think about what's going to be happening in the next 10 years, right, it's, as I said, it's very hard to predict, but there are some estimates that are put by research organizations. We'll see a world of 5 billion internet users, right, representing 60% of internet usage. I think this is a very conservative number. This is based on a linear progression, not exponential. We know how technology develops, doesn't develop in a linear way. So I think we'll see it even more. And the world will be AI-first world, right? And I can relate what it would mean for me to talk to assistants and feel totally normal with it, right? But think about the people, the youngsters that grew up in the world where nothing else actually existed. So that's a very important aspect to get. The other important aspect is that technology has changed and will change. So we're living in a mobile-first world, a pocket device with supercomputer capacities, with loads of sensors, right? So you cannot be building your infrastructure, your data analytics in the same way as you build in a desktop-first world. And this is why you probably need to think about the companies that can help you do these things in fast and lean way. Same with AI, machine learning. We know how much computing it takes. We know that we need correct infrastructure to make it successful. We know how much time it takes to get the models right. You can tap into this, right? And that was not the case back in the days. 5 or 10 years ago. And the last and most important change is that the user expectations have changed. So some time ago, people were fine with bad web experiences. Now they're not. So this is just an example. You see how the probability of bounce, so people leaving the website, changes as the load time increases. Drastically, people are only patient for 1 to 3 seconds, right? Which is ludicrous. Think about, like, you can wait for a second or 2 more if the website is good enough. Well, that's not how people think. If the website is not good enough, I'm going to find a better website, right? So you already have to think about the technology that would allow you to deploy websites and load them fast, right? And how you're going to do that. There is a very nice saying by David Rose. He's an author, an angel investor, also a very good book. He said, back in the days, reflecting to the old traditional companies, that the companies that were designed to succeed in 20th century, they will fail in 21st century. Now think, given the pace of technology and the change, we're seeing the world where probably any company that's designed for the last decade is doomed to failure in the next decade, right? And that means that companies need to change faster, but that means that there are opportunities and pockets to build companies in a different way and accelerate very fast. So what? I have last 2 slides, but I think they're important because they're action points for you. I think we live in a world where barriers to a global opportunity are lower than ever. So everybody who wants, with the right skills and the right team from Minsk, can be a global company, and you even have examples proving that. We're also living in a world where leaner ways of building businesses are possible. Uber does not own any roads. They don't own any cars. Airbnb does not own any hotels, right? The same way you cannot own part of your technological infrastructure or part of your dashboards or acquisition activities, because if that's not your core asset, why do you need to focus on it and build it your own? And the last aspect, I think, what's important is that the companies, the established technology companies, they now have more and more support, more and more programs for developers to succeed. And I think this will just increase because that's where we're going, right? The world of exponential companies built on top of other exponential companies. So my last message is that after this conference, I believe you sourced a lot of knowledge, and the only thing that's needed for you is just to get out and build your exponential organizations 2.0. Don't forget partnerships, and thank you very much.